In this video, we are going to be talking about human-machine interface, specifically the semantic HMI. All right, so far in my classes, we have not dealt with the HMI other than interacting. I've created HMIs for you so you can simulate different programs. That way you don't have to have the actual PLC or HMI or buttons or anything wired up at home. And you can practice with these programs and interact and see the pieces move on the conveyor belt and cause fires when you turn multiple outputs on at the same time and things like that. So you've interacted with them in the fact of downloading to them and using them to interact, push buttons, those types of things. Now we are going to get into programming. So like, how do we make the start button, that button right there, be the start button that's right here? Or how do I get this yellow tank to change colors when the pressure goes up? All those sorts of things. So we're going to move into TIA Portal. Now, I don't know if I've mentioned this before in video, but TIA Portal is a great piece of software, as in it does everything that you ever need to do for Siemens PLCs, as far as I'm concerned. But because of that, it gets kind of complicated. So right now, I've got basically a bone stock program. I have our PLC added to it. If you don't know how to add a PLC, you can go back and watch one of my previous videos. But so far, we've got a bone stock PLC added to this. I am going to create a few tags here. Default tag table is perfectly fine. And I'm going to call HMI start. I'm going to call HMI stop. We're going to call it fake limit. We'll call HMI limit. Not HMI limit. Our HMI output. And I want all of these to be memories. So we're just going to go M5.0 just because I don't like starting at 0 because of tags that the HMI maybe, or not the HMI, the PLC may be using. Now, we do need an actual start button as well. So I'm going to go start button, button start. Just so it groups them all when we search by letters, button stop. And we'll just go with normal output, those types of things. And I will make these actual I inputs. 0.0, I0.1, and make this Q0.0, those types of things. So I've got some very basic code here. Now, we can go ahead and create just a quick program, just a normal latching circuit, nothing fancy, something that you've already done. And we can just throw, let's make that close since I don't have actual outputs. Gotta latch around the start button. Go so we can go button start, button stop. It's called output, and this is also output. So nothing too crazy here. We could download this. We could trigger the start button. It would start the H output. Those types of things. Nothing too out of the ordinary here. And I'll be back once I've got that downloaded. All right, and we are back. I just wanted to show, I had to quick change my tags slightly, and I've got real buttons now, so I can, if I hold the stop button, I press the start button, my system works, and if I let go, it stops itself. So all is well and good on that simple, very, very simple latching circuit. Now we are going to move on to the HMI. Now we need to add a new device. And I should say, before we continue, if you don't know how to download to your PLC, you should go watch my video on initially setting up your PLC. And we're going to kind of cover the same things in this little video with the HMI. But we're going to go ahead and add a new device here. And right now we are on controllers. We need to go down to the HMI section. And we have two options here. We're going with the basic panel. And the reason we're going with the basic panel is because that is what I have. So we have a 7-inch display, and we are doing basic. You have basic and basic portrait. So basic is going to be landscape style, so you want it wider than it is tall. Portrait, it's going to be taller than it is wide if you want to mount your HMI sideways. I don't want to do that. I want to keep the basic format going. And then you have two options here. And if we actually look at this, you have the KTP 700 basic DP, and then you have PN. So DP is device net or device port, something along those lines. But the PN is Profinet, and since we are using an Ethernet-based connection, that is the option that we want to go with. So we are doing the KTP 700 basic PN. That would be the, let's see, what's the difference? The 2GB03. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK, and we'll give the software a minute. All right, so after about a minute and 30 seconds, whatever it takes, it's going to take a little bit of time. Siemens software always seems to be slow to me, but after a little bit of time, we come up with this screen. And it's basically asking us to configure our connections. So first we're going to do is we're going to browse for our PLC. So we can go ahead and hit the browse button. And then we only have one option. So we can say PLC1. We can double click on that. It tells us our interface is Profinet, and we are good to go. Go ahead and hit next. Next, we've got some resolution that we can't change. We can change the background color if you'd want. You can also get rid of headers and things like that. I'm going to turn them off. Why not? We can go to an alarms. We'll just leave those buttons as they sit. Screens, if you want to add screens, remove screens, whatever, we at least need to have our root screen. That's basically all we're going to be interacting with in this class, but you can have multiple screens for multiple different situations, which maybe we'll get to in later this semester. So we'll go ahead and hit next there. And then when you use system screens, root screen system, yep, all right, continue. Buttons, we'll just leave those as they are, and now we can go ahead and hit finish, and this might again take a little bit. All right, and we are back. As you can see over in our project tree on the left-hand side now, we have our HMI all the way up at the top, and then we have, if we look all the way here down at the bottom, we have our HMI. So PLC's at the top, HMI at the bottom. Sorry if I misspoke about that a minute ago. But that is what we've got going on. So for now, we're going to just minimize the PLC so we can focus on what's going on with the HMI. Now, the first thing that you would see if we look at the screen on the computer versus the actual HMI is you will see a very nice thing that they both look exactly the same. We've got the little, and on the screen, we've got stuff going across the bottom. We've got our F1 through F8 buttons across the bottom of that, and all of those lovely things going on. So we are very much a exact copy of what we've got going on. Now, what is next? Now we need to start adding things to our HMI. And over on the right-hand side of the screen over here, we have our elements. All right. We also have some basic objects up here at the top. But for right now, we're going to basically use those basic elements and basic objects and elements. You also do have some other options down here. That is going to be a bit more of the crazy, advanced side of things. But for our purposes today, we don't really need to get into this. So the first thing that we're going to add is some buttons. So in the elements screen right here, this one, that's just like a gray square, that, if we hover over it, you gonna tell me? That is a button, as it says. So we're just gonna drag one of those in. Now you can resize this, you could make the button really big, you can make it really itty bitty small, whatever you want. For our purposes right now, it doesn't matter too much how big it is, so you can just leave it alone. However, what does matter to us is making this button actually do something. You can also, as you saw, you can change the text, so we can call this, start. Sounds good. But now, to make it actually do something, we double click on it. That's how you change the text, I'm going to say. But if we right click on this and you say properties, or you bring the properties windows up from the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that we've got a few options. Probably for the purposes of this button, to me, the most important one's going to be animations and events, but we'll come back to that. First, under general, it's just telling you mode, text, or graphic, or if it's invisible, there's a hotkey for it, so we can work with that, but we're not doing that. Also, you have a list here, so you can say start button, and if you want something else when it's not pressed, you could have it say that. But for our purposes, just start is perfectly fine. Under appearance, you can see we can change the background color. You could change the fill pattern. So you could say, I want it to be solid, and that allows you to change this to like green, or whatever the magic color it is that you want. Red, if it's a nice red button, it might be good, but we're going green. So we'll go with green. You can also change quarter radius if you want, text color, anything appearance related here. When you go down to text format, that's where you can actually change your text font that you're using. I always stick with Tahoma. And just overall leave it alone. I might make the font bigger, so if you just change this 16 to say 32, boom, now you got some nice big text there. But for the most part, that's really all that's going on in here. That's all kind of appearance related. For me, what really matters is the events. And you'll notice on the left here, we've got 6 options. We've got click, press, release, activate, deactivate, and change. For our purposes, press and release are probably the 2 that we care about, because when we click on it, or we press it with our finger, not if we're clicking with our mouse, but if we press with our finger, that's press, and when we let go of the button with our finger, that's release. And you have a few options to make this do something. One option is setbit. And what this would do, and we'd come down here and I'd label this HMI start. Notice I just start typing H in it and it comes up, so I can say HMI start. And now every time I push this button, HMI start will go to a value of 1 because we are setting the bit. We are setting it to be on. So that would be a value of 1. True, green on the screen if it's a normally open content. However, right now when you let go of this, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to be like, okay, he let go of me, and that value is going to stay 1. And somewhere else in your code, you would have to make it a release. Now you could add a second button here that when you press it, releases it. Actually, I'm in the release category right now. Supposed to be in press. So let's go to the press and type through that. So we have set bit again. And I'm going to make that HMI start. Go. And then under the release one, if we want to actually go back to 0, we would want to change this, instead of set bit, we'd want this to be reset bit. And again, we would set that to HMI start. Now the nice thing here is you could invert the value of this button. If you wanted to make it more like a traditional stop button, you could have, when you press it, it would go to 0, and when you release it, you would go to 1 just by switching set and reset around. So it is a very powerful tool here. You could also set one bit when you press it and release another bit when you, or reset another bit when you release it. So you got a lot of control over it using these types of options. However, what I actually prefer to do, let me go ahead and delete this, is under press, what I will do is set bit while key pressed. And this will allow you to overall simplify your life because you don't have to go into that release option. It automatically goes into that for you. And I would still make this my HMI start. Now let's say, what bit do you want to toggle? 0, 1, and I always just leave that alone with we only have one bit with the Boolean tag, so that's all we have. So we're going to set bit key with press HMI start, leave that as a 0, and everything should be good. All right, so now that we've got our stop button, let's go ahead and add a stop button as well. So we could just copy and paste this. To me, that is the easiest way to do things. And what I find really interesting here is, when you're dragging this around, you'll notice that it wants to latch to certain things. I find very convenient. But once I've done one button and I have the spacing right, when I paste another one, notice it does the exact same spacing again and again, all the way to the bottom of the screen. Same thing if I were to go to the right with this. Let's copy it and paste it again. Drag that one to the right. There we go. Now it skipped one because I didn't have this button there. But anyway, it does that same spacing again. So that is very convenient for doing quick setup of like multiple things going vertically down the page. So it is very nice. You might want to keep that in the kind of the back of your head when you're doing these types of things. But anyway, this one we're going to make say stop, and then we're going to go ahead and make it red because, well, it's a stop button. So we'll come back in here to properties. We'll change our background color to be a nice red color. We'll leave the white text. That sounds good. Under events, under events, I got to be clicked on it first. There we go. We have set bit while key press, and I'm going to make this HMI stop this time. Now you will notice that this is actually searching both the HMI tags, which it has its own dedicated tag table. I'll show you that in a minute, and also the PLC tabs that it is networked, which is really convenient for trying to link these tags together. You don't have to go find which ones are in the HMI or on the PLC and what they're called. It just searches it for you as long as you have that connection made, which we did when we were setting up the PLC, the HMI. If you don't have that connection made, it obviously doesn't know to search them, and you will have to go through and network that by yourself, which either I'll show you in this video or maybe one per day. But anyway, so it's searching. I want this to be HMI stop, so I can go ahead and select that. And so far, so good. We've now got 2 buttons that are working that will toggle the tags that are actually on the PLC itself. Now, we also probably want to see if the output is on or off, not right now, according to the code. So to do that, say we've got a motor or something. Obviously, we've got an I/O field, we've got a symbolic I/O field, we've got some graphic stuff, some sliders, those types of things. But those are all allowing us to interact with them. We don't need to interact with this. We just want to see whether it's on or off. So for our purposes, we're just going to go ahead and grab a little circle. And then I'm going to go ahead and put some text next to the circle. I'll just say output for this purpose. But ideally, you would put whatever the output is, motor, heater, whatever the case. And let's, you know what, let's go ahead and make this nice and big. There we go. Let's put output right in the center. So let's go ahead and make that font bigger. So properties to home, let's make that 32 as well, because we can. What our buttons are. You know, let's just move that around. Use the arrow keys to adjust it to where you want it. All right, now let's go ahead to that circle. Let's look at the properties there. So we now want to have the output of this change of color on us. So this is purely we're receiving information from the PLC. We don't need to interact with it. So we can use a basic object for that. And what we're going to do is we're going to do an animation. So our animation in here, we're going to do one that has a display associated with it. You could also do movement. You can actually move this circle down the screen, which I will show you in another video another day. And we're going to go ahead and do an add a new animation. We want appearance and visibility. In this case, we are doing a color change. So we're going to do appearance. And then this tag is going to be output. So if I start typing, it allows me to show it. Invalid internal data type. All right, let's go quick see what's going on with my output tag. Don't see why I should have gotten that error, but let's go ahead and just look and see if we got it. Output is a Q00. There should be nothing wrong with that. So let's go ahead back to our root screen down the bottom. Pick out those properties. All right, why does it not like this? All right, well, I don't know what's going on there, but somehow we lost our connection. So we are going to go ahead and set that back up. As I mentioned a minute ago, we're going to show you in this video another one, so might as well be this one. So up in the top left-hand corner here, we have devices and networks. We are going to go ahead and double-click on that. And that will bring us up this lovely screen, which I can actually zoom this up a little bit, I think. A little too big, bring it back, there we go. And it shows us our PLC and our HMI. I don't know what happened, what I clicked to destroy this network connection, but I did. So on this screen, we have two options. We've got network and then we've got connections. We are going to have to make both of them. So the first, we're going to make sure you've got network connected, and you can drag a line from there and then click on this one, and it tells you, hey, pn/IE_1, and we've got our network. So that's saying, hey, these are networked together. Now we need to go ahead and give it a connection, but you click on that and you're like, nothing changed. And you're right, I agree. I think this is where it could use some help. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and click from here, and we're going to drag it over to this one again. And now it tells us that we have an HMI connection. So hopefully now when we go back to our HMI, we should be in better shape. So let's go back to our HMI. Let's go into our animation, our appearance. And look, now we've got our PLC as an option, and we'll go with output, and it still doesn't like that. Now, probably what's going on is we don't have that link still completely. So we're going to go to our HMI tags, which again, I said I'd show you in a little bit. So here we have our HMI tags, and if you notice, this looks just like it does on a PLC. So everything is being consistent here, which again is kind of nice. So if we go back to our default tag table, here you can see our connection is set to internal tag, which it is not. We're going to do an HMI connection, and it automatically grabs PLC. And the nice thing is, this is kind of like Excel, for those who use Excel often. In the bottom left-hand corner right here, you will see that there is kind of a square. And again, it might be kind of hard to see on my screen here. But right there, if you put your mouse over it, you notice it becomes a little plus sign. You can just drag that down over our other tags, and we're going to overwrite them, and boom, it automatically creates that connection for us. So don't know what happened, don't know why that disappeared, but while we're here, we might as well talk about what's going on. So just like your normal tag table, we've got our name going on, and that is nothing special. Again, just whatever you want to call it. And then we also have our data type. Now this needs to match the data type on the PLC. Ideally, how I do it is I like to just grab them from the PLC as I need them. But you can, and I also like to keep them to the same name. So whatever on the PLC it is on the HMI. Now, if you've already got them created on the PLC, or on the HMI linked to your PLC, and then you change your PLC tag, it is not going to change in that tag on the HMI. So just something to be aware of. But anyway, our data types, those do need to match. Then we've got our connection, which as I showed you, we just created that HMI connection between the PLC and this. So that's what's going on there. We also have the PLC name that we are connecting to. In that case, it is PLC1. And if we were to scroll up in our project tree, you will see that, hey, PLC1, right there. We have the PLC tag again. These, again, do not have to match. This can be whatever you want, and that can be something else. So if your coworker Bob made all the PLC tags and you're making the HMI and you think you should have a different name, you can do that. That is acceptable. Our addresses, as you can see, are leaving blank here because these are not real addresses or anything. These are all symbolic. Access mode is symbolic. And then our acquisition cycle. Now, this one may or may not be important to you. All right. The acquisition cycle is how often do you want to synchronize this information? Do you want it done every second? Do you want it done every half a second? So here you can see our options: 100 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds, 1 second, 2, 4, 10, 1 minute, hours. So you can go up to an hour. For these little push buttons, it doesn't matter for our purposes. When I'm doing things and I've created HMIs for my students to use for their simulating these projects at home, for the most part, I always drop this down to 100 milliseconds because I want things to be shown on screen quicker than a second. I want it to update as quick as possible. If I could do less, I would even do less, but a tenth of a second is plenty for my purposes. So now the downside to doing 100 milliseconds is you're going to have more traffic on your network. Now, with one little PLC and whatnot, that's not such a big deal. But if you're going to have a lot of things happening on your network, then that could be a big problem. So you really do want to keep in mind your acquisition cycles. For things in this class, 100 milliseconds is fine. But again, to each their own with their preferences. So again, I'm just going to drag that down and over everything. So mine are as quick as possible here. So we now have our tags created. Well, some of our tags created. If we go back to our root screen, we can see what's going on there. And I can click this and I can delete it. Notice that we've got screen 0 and system screens. And then over here in our project tree, we've got a screen section, just like we have the tags. And here you can see root screen 0, screen 1, system screen. So we could actually, if we wanted to come into screen 0, we could do something. Notice we got a back button now, screen 1. If we go to screen 1, you just have a back. So these are kind of like almost being menus where we can kind of dive a little deeper into things if we would need to. I said for most things, as far as I'm concerned, our root screen is going to be plenty, but maybe you want to have more screens for a much fancier application than what I've got going on. Anyway, so we've got our start, stop, and our output. These screens might be really good for me if I would have multiple projects, as any of you guys do, and I could just do a different screen for each project. So that way, one HMI loaded, it would work for everything. But that's not normally how I work things. Each one's its own little assignment. So I do them all separately. But anyway, so if we were to go ahead and download this, and just like you would download your PLC, up here at the top, we've got the little square box pointing down. All right, so we're going to go ahead and click that. We are downloading to this. I believe it should be upload, but the whole world of PLC thinks that it is download, so that's what it is. And make sure that you have your interface set correctly, which mine is PNIE, and then you also have your interface, that what you're using. If we actually look at my interface options, there are a lot because I've got an normal Ethernet connection. I've got my USB Ethernet connection, which is why I've been my PLC. I've got a VPN's interfaces as far as Windows are concerned. So all those are options, but not right now. What I really need is this USB Ethernet, and that should bring up my PLC. And at the bottom here, you can see what's going on. If I go ahead and bring up the dot cam again, if I click this flash LED, it actually doesn't do anything. Oh, doesn't look like it's going to do anything. Oh, there we go. The screen's flashing. All right, now this is nice for the purposes of identifying which screen it is in a multitude of screens that you are working with, or that you're thinking is the one you want. So if you're trying to download your HMI to one screen of 4 or 5 that are in a cabinet all on the same network, this will help you identify which one it is that you actually care about changing. Now, obviously, in this instance, I only have one screen, but if I had 4 or 5 of them plugged in, they would all show up here, and then I'd be able to flash the screens until I figured out which one was the one I was actually working on. After you've got your HMI selected, you can go ahead and select the load button right here, and that will allow you to start downloading your HMI. Now, it is going to check for errors and things like that, which should not be a big deal. And it's going to compile your HMI. Now, sometimes I've had some some text issues on. I have 5 laptops in my lab that have text issues. I don't know what's going on with them. I'm gonna have to get IT to look at those. So just be warned that there are some weird problems that occur, and I have not been able to find answers to some of those. I've been using a different computer. So hopefully you do not have that problem. I always overwrite the objects if they exist online just to protect myself in case of some funkiness going on. Again, I'd like to start fresh, so that is my option. I'm going to go hit load, and it's going to go ahead and load this. Now you can see on the screen that it is finishing its download. It is restarting. It's showing you, hey, we've got this connected, and we are overall connected. Now, if I hold my stop button and I press start, you should see the output. I thought the output was going to go green, but maybe not. What did I select? 1 second. That's right, we never finished configuring the output because, well, we got distracted with it having a bad tag. So, in the output with the appearance, under the animation or display option, we have it set to the tag of output, and right now we have a range. Now, because this is a Boolean, we have a range of 0 and 1. Those are our 2 options. So at a range of 0, we'll make it gray, off. That sounds a good color. When we are running, let's go ahead and make this yellow. Now, you do have the option to make this flash right in the HMI itself. I don't tend to do that. I just don't think it's a nice little view. But it is something that you could do if you wanted to. I'd much rather make something flash from within the PLC itself than on the HMI. But truthfully, probably using the flashing on the HMI is going to give you a more consistent flashing effect than using the PLC. Again, just because of those update times and those types of things, those acquisition cycles, as the HMI called it itself. So let me go ahead and re-download this, and then I will be right back. All right, so now down on our HMI, you can see that if I hold my buttons correctly, we've got the output turning on. And when I let go of the button, the output turns off. So that is how my code is working correctly. Now these other 2, I can click on them, and nothing's happening. All right, and when you're in person, you can see a slight little border shadow around the buttons happen that's saying like, hey, you're pressing this, so you can tell I am actually pressing it. Some of the HMIs have it enabled to beep every time you click a button on the screen. I found that very annoying, so I turned it off, but that is something that you may be seeing. So just something to be aware of that you might be hearing that is. Now, clicking those, nothing's happening. That's because nothing in our code is actually using them. If we go look at our tag table here, and I go ahead and turn my sunglasses on so we can see our actual outputs going on. All right, now we've got our sunglasses on. I can scroll over so I can see my HMIs. And as I press the start button, you will see that our HMI start goes true. And if I let go, it goes false. Then my HMI stop goes true, and it goes false when I let go. So the buttons are actually working. Now, I may say, if I would say, hey, interface these into your program, you may be thinking, all right, let me just come into my program here. 1 sec. And you may say, okay, let me just go ahead and change this from button start to HMI start. Boom, done. And yes, that is true. That would make it work, that HMI start button would now be what we would press to turn the output on. Good job. However, now my real world start button has stopped working. All right, so you actually need to add the HMI start and the HMI stop in their correct locations. And just as a reminder for you, everything that is here in parallel with each other, those would be all start buttons. So these are all our start locations. And anything over here that would be in series in this blank space, those would all be stop conditions. So what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to add another symbol here. Now, we're going to go with a make instead of a break this time. Actually, no, I want to make this a break again. I want to make it normally closed, so I call those breaks. And I'm going to go ahead and HMI stop. And I'm going to flip this because my actual button in real world is normally closed. So I'm tired of holding it, so I'm going to make that a make. And then we're going to add another branch here with another make on it. And I'm going to call that one my HMI start. So now if I were to go ahead and download this, be back in a moment. All right, we've now got it downloaded. So if I press the green button, you will see button not working. Oh, it's because I have 2 HMI starts. 1 moment, please. All right, now if I press my green start button, that actuates and works just fine. And if I bring up my dock cam, you can see our output is on. Now I can press the red stop button over here on the screen. There we go, and that turns the output off. If I press the green start button, it turns it on. And if I press my red stop button, it turns it off. So here you can see how we can integrate the HMI as basically an infinite number of buttons and outputs and things like that that we can monitor and things to become a input device for our PLC without having to wire up thousands of buttons and things. We could have all of them on this HMI. And you can do some very impressive things with the HMI itself. As I said, I've made simulations of a conveyor belt with a box that moves up down the line that has sensors that trip, everything being simulated, including the sensor value. They don't have any real sensors on it. So it's a very convenient tool to have to add capability, function, monitoring, whatever the case it is, to certain things. So that is a brief introduction to how to set up an HMI with start, stop, with buttons, I should say, and allowing you to monitor outputs.